if you think the administration acted correctly last weekend.
Well, I think it was the right thing to do to begin the process of getting the Maduro regime out of power and turning the government of Venezuela back over to the people. There's no doubt that in 2024, as in 2018, Maduro stole the election. The opposition had won legitimately and really are the legitimate government of Venezuela. But I think we've removed Maduro, but the regime is still there. There's no regime change at this point. And I'm very concerned that the way the president attacked Maria Corina Machado, the leader of the opposition, said she didn't have respect in the country. Really, the opposition wasn't up to governing, and turning to the likes of Delcy Rodriguez and really Maduro's henchmen and henchwomen who are still there and believing they're going to be a transition, it puts us in a very difficult position. I'm worried that we've removed the face of the regime, but not the regime itself.
Right. Yeah. Well, to that end, I know that you had concerns about Maduro in the president's first term, and we did a little bit of digging on this. Having had sat down with Maduro, my colleague Eric Schatzker in 2021 traveled to Caracas to talk to him about global politics. And Maduro said at the time he was in talks with the first Trump administration with you, John Bolton, around a meeting at the UN General Assembly in 2018. Maduro specifically implicated you as having canceled that meeting. Listen to what he told us in 2021.
I was about to personally meet him on September 2018 with President Donald Trump when I went to the UN General Assembly in New York. We got a call from the White House, but we knew about John Bolton's pressure and that of other people around Donald Trump to prevent his attempt to meet me. If we had met, it had been a different story today.
John Bolton, is that true? And to what extent, if so, did that moment inform Donald Trump's views on Venezuela today?
Well, I wish it were true. I wish I could stop meetings like that easily. But he's making that up, but it's a good story. So if he wants to believe it, let him tell that to the court.
Ambassador Bolton, if we're looking at what is going to happen next here, there's a lot of different messaging, a lot of different rhetoric. We hear from President Trump that the U.S. is going to run Venezuela. But if we look at what other advisors are saying, we keep hearing the idea that there's a lot of leverage points here by the U.S. The embargo on oil, the military armada poised, still potentially pointing at Venezuela. Do you think that the U.S. has enough leverage to make change in Venezuela from afar through these kind of pressure points?
Well, I'd like to know what the plan is, if that's what they think they're going to do. I'd be the happiest person around if the rest of the Maduro regime collapsed tomorrow. But when you hear from the administration, the usual anonymous sources, that they think they can work with Delcy Rodriguez to transition to something, I don't know what the something is, and that the Venezuelan oil industry is just going to emerge from the ashes and suddenly be a big producer again, I think people are dreaming. I think this is a very difficult and dangerous situation. I think that the administration has acted in an ad hoc, day-to-day fashion. That doesn't guarantee failure, but let's be clear, if the objective is to turn Venezuela into a society where its people actually govern it, and maybe that's not Trump's intention, but if that is, they're a long way from it. And anybody who thinks the Venezuelan oil industry is going to emerge from the ashes in a matter of weeks or months or even a couple of years doesn't know how bad the situation is.
So then what is it going to take to help fuel that turnaround? Because we have reporting, as we mentioned at the top of the show, people familiar telling Bloomberg News that part of why this White House thinks that it can work with Delcy Rodriguez is because she could serve as that bridge between the government and the private sector, because it seems like there has to be such an emphasis on potential investment and rebuilding the infrastructure in order for Venezuela to get on sound economic footing.
Well, I don't know what they base that on, and I'd like to know what CEO of what major American oil company is just getting all of his top advisors together to get on a plane to go to Caracas and put billions and billions of capital expenditures into Venezuela. The political situation is unstable. By the way, the price of oil is still at $55 to $60 a barrel. I'm not sure anybody thinks that more capital investment, more drilling, more oil on the market is going to benefit the oil companies at this point. I think there's a lot of hot air out there about what's going on, and that's dangerous because if your planning is not based on reality, when reality finally strikes, you have no plan B to back up to.
You mentioned Maria Corina Machado. She turned up on Fox News last evening, of all places, on the Hannity program, presumably to get the attention of Donald Trump. Here's what she said.
I'm planning to go back to Venezuela as soon as possible. As I've always said, Sean, every day I make a decision where I am more useful for a cause. That's why I stayed in hiding for over 16 months, and that's why I decided to go out, because I believed that at this moment I'm more useful to our cause, being able to speak out from where I am right now. But I'm planning to go as soon as possible back home.
She's talking about sharing her Nobel Peace Prize somehow with Donald Trump. Could she be a partner, or has the administration turned away from her permanently?
Well, I think they damaged her and the opposition very badly on Saturday. I think the opposition, just ordinary people inside Venezuela, wonder what it means when the U.S. doesn't trust its leadership. Now, maybe she can work her way back into his good graces. My recommendation would be give him the Nobel Peace Prize medal that you get. The Nobel Foundation can make another one just for you, but give it to Trump. Otherwise, you know what he's going to do. Theodore Roosevelt won the Nobel Peace Prize for mediating the war between Russia and Japan during his term as president. And his Nobel Prize hangs on the wall of the Roosevelt Room in the White House. I've been worried recently Trump's just going to take it off the wall so he can have it for himself. So Mrs. Machado gives him hers. Maybe that'll take care of that.
We also want to talk about potential ripple effects here. What could come next when it comes to other countries? And I'm actually particularly interested about the potential impacts for China, of course, a huge importer of Venezuelan crude. But China's made a lot of significant inroads when it comes to Latin America, signing on signatories to its Belt and Road infrastructure initiatives. Could this hurt Beijing's efforts to make those inroads in Latin America? How is this changing the calculus in terms of the U.S.-Beijing competition?
Well, I think the most important American strategic interest in Venezuela is the increasing influence of malign foreign powers that don't have the best interest of the United States at heart. That certainly starts with Russia and Cuba. That was the main problem back in 2018 and 2019. But Iran and China are big players on the scene now. And as you say, China has an enormous concern with Venezuela's oil reserves and its production. The Chinese look for oil wherever they can find it. They're an energy poor country whose economy depends on getting these foreign sources. And by most estimates, including the estimates of the U.S. government, Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, more even than Saudi Arabia. And yet it produces an insignificant amount of oil. Of that oil it produces, China buys about 80% of the production, according to the most recent statistics. So I don't think Beijing is going to sit idly by while a new government comes in that may be more hospitable to American investment and possibly exclude China from the Venezuelan reserve. So what China is doing behind the scenes, we don't know. There were high-level Chinese meeting with Maduro literally within a day or two of his being grabbed over the weekend. And what policies China's pursuing, what aid it may be giving to what remains of the Maduro government, what Russia and Cuba and Iran are doing, we don't know. But I don't think they're just going to withdraw quietly from the scene.
Well, you know, as we consider what many are now referring to as the Dunroe Doctrine, John Bolton, I wonder who you think should worry more right now, Greenland or Iran?
Well, I think Iran should be more worried given the protests which continue to grow all across Iran, not just in Tehran. This regime in Tehran is very weak, and I think the levels of discontent in the country have never been higher. And the world would be a lot safer if the regime of the Ayatollahs fell and you could get some kind of alternative, hopefully free government in Iran. I think what Trump says about Greenland and his interest in taking control of Greenland is very harmful to the NATO alliance. You know, Greenland, part of Denmark, is a NATO ally. Denmark's been an ally of the United States for years, and you have advisors to the president saying on national television that Denmark's claim to the island is illegitimate, and nobody will oppose American force if we decide to use it. If we did, it would destroy the NATO alliance. But even this chatter is irresponsible, isn't taking into account the real threats we face in the United States. We have a legitimate security interest in Greenland. So does the entire NATO alliance. And if we just took this out of the spotlight and worked cooperatively together, I think we could ensure greater security, not just for Greenland, but for the entire alliance.